Welcome back to the Creative AI podcast, where I talk with filmmakers, writers, and artists about creating in the age of artificial intelligence. I'm your host, Andy Baker, and today I'm talking with Doug McGinness, founder of Animated Company, who discusses the transformative impact of AI on animation and VFX. He shares his journey from initial fear of AI's potential to replace human creativity to embracing it as a powerful tool for storytelling. Our discussion explores the divide within the creative community regarding AI adoption, the perspective of clients on AI and creative work, and the importance of experimentation and play in the creative process. Doug also highlights various AI tools for creativity and speculates on the future of AI in the film industry, emphasizing the need for the human touch in creative endeavors. Doug, whose opinions have been formed while working in the weeds, is sharp, deeply reflective, and eager to advocate for AI. And I think you'll learn a lot from him, just as I did. All right, so I am on here with Doug McGinness. He's founder and director of Animated Company, does AI for VFX and animation, and he has something on LinkedIn where he talks about it's the future of storytelling, and I happen to agree with him. So it's fascinating to have a chance to talk to you about the work that you're doing. So, Doug, if you would be so kind as to introduce yourself to our listeners, what you're doing right now, maybe some of the steps along the way, and we'll just dig into how AI is foundational to your creative practice.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Andy. It's great to be on here. And so I'm Doug McGinness, as Andy said. So I started Animated Company a couple of years ago, and what we do is we're an AI animation studio. We work with VFX studios as well as animation studios. We create AI animated content. And my journey actually started back in New York. I studied film production and computer science at my university, which at the time I didn't think would be relevant to each other. And actually, within the world of AI, has become very relevant. I started in production, and then I got into advertising, where I was working in animation and motion graphics for many years. And with my AI journey, everything started back in 2021 with Midjourney. I became deeply depressed, as many people did, seeing AI, thinking that my job as an animator would be completely gone in a couple of years. And I was kind of right, because what happened is my job has not completely changed. But ultimately, it's changed, in my opinion, for the better. The work that I'm creating now and creating with my studio is work that I probably could really only have dreamed of making several years ago. So I believe AI is absolutely the future. I believe it's a good thing. And I believe ultimately as a creative, it's empowered my creativity 100%. There's no question. I'm definitely in the camp of AI is good.
So much there that I want to touch on. In that, part of what fascinates me is the journey that everybody's on. And so if you don't mind digging into that moment of like, okay, there's Midjourney in its early forms, and already you're like, okay, projecting forward. And you're not alone in this. I shared it. I know a number of people that I've talked to have shared that feeling of that pit in their stomach, like, oh my God, the ground beneath me is shifting and I don't know what the future looks like right now. How quickly did you adapt from that, where you're like, okay, this isn't something to fear, it's something to play with, iterate, get my head around? Because you went from that to, okay, now you believe it's central to what you do and the new forms of storytelling. Walk us through some of the steps in between.
Yeah, it's a great question, because it didn't take very long, but I think the mental side of it, of coming around to it, took longer. So when Midjourney, I had access to Midjourney, which was the public. I didn't get any special access to it. So the public access to it in July of 2022, I remember playing with it. And back then it was still very in its early stages. You could only make 1x1 images. The quality was really low for the time. And it was all very blocky. But what I was struck with was just this foreign, to me, concept of being able to type a text of what I was picturing and have it come out. And again, the prompt coherence was pretty poor, but for me, it was pretty close to magic. And I remember feeling exactly like you're saying, this strong sense of excitement, and also, this is it. The ground has suddenly shifted, and everything that I thought I knew, I could see was slowly starting to crumble. Suddenly, as I'm projecting outwards. However, I just became kind of addicted to it. And so I was playing with it for a long, long time and just typing and texting things. Now, at the time, I was working with a lot of artists and designers and animators. And at that point in time, it was still a little bit of a novelty. People were a little nervous about it, but it was treated as kind of gimmicky. I remember talking to people saying, hey, we should, maybe try to bring in Midjourney on this project, or maybe try, and test this. And the response at the time with a lot of people was, okay, it's like fun, but it's not really something we can use professionally. And I remember kind of thinking to myself, like, guys, just wait. This thing it can do this now, but just wait, because surely it's just going to get better and better. And the fact that it can do this already is just crazy. So that was around 2022. But like I said, I think the mental part of it took a lot longer. So even though I was using the tools every day, and once the video tools came out, like Runway and Pika and, all of these video models started to come into the forefront, I was also using those. I was playing around, I was experimenting. And in the back of my mind, it was like this kind of gulf was forming in my head, where I was having just a lot of fun playing with these tools, seeing, these ideas that I had some of them I'd had since I was, 12, 13 years old, these stories. I could suddenly bring them to life, and I didn't necessarily have to, spend a lot of time on it. So that was one thing. But then on the other hand, this gnawing sense of, well, what does that mean on a larger scale? If suddenly anybody can do this, then how is this business going, the business of visual effects, of animation, how is that going to be impacted? So it took a long time for me to actually kind of bridge those two and start to see that, okay, there is a world where there is still a need for human input and artistry, while at the same time having the creative exploration that comes with AI.
Again, you have, in one answer, touched on so many things that are sort of at the heart of a lot of these conversations. I've said on this podcast a few times now that as I talk to more and more people, these things, the issues tend to coalesce around a handful of larger questions. And, this sense that the tools are only going to get better. That really is kind of like this, the two camps when people experience AI. Some of them are just like, oh, it's a novelty, or it's not going to be capable of. And then the other people who can and are willing to project forward and say, this is as bad as it's ever going to be. It's only going to get better from this point on. And all of the profit incentives are there. I mean, I hate to make it about profit, but it's like the companies aren't going to slow down for anybody. Why should they? These are amazingly powerful tools. And it's like, and I think you wrote this in one of your posts about that very now familiar refrain that we're not going to get replaced by AI. We're going to get replaced by people who know how to use AI, in the sense that these tools are a massive unlock. I love that you touched on that the ability to create. Like, I look at my list of stories and it's like, okay, yesterday I thought I'm going to be able to get to 10% of these before I die. Now I look at it, I'm like, I think I could tell them all. And just because of the ability to swiftly iterate and have access to the tools to be able to start to visualize them. And you in particular, when you're playing around with animation, where I don't have that visual gift, I've always wanted it. But I can now visualize things and get them to a certain point where I can then hand them over to have a clearer vision of what it is I'm hoping that the final product will be. The other thing you touched on in there, that sense of wonder and fun, that using these tools, it's like, wow, this is why I started creating stories in the first place, because you get to play in the sandbox. And this just unlocks so much of that. Anyway, I will get to a question. It's just you touched on so many fascinating topics. But, that word into images aspect, which is kind of crazy when you try to wrap your head around, I'm just typing words. And really, words are digital ink on a screen, which represent concepts, which it then wraps its AI mind around and gives you some sense of what you are looking for. It is magic. It's algorithmic magic that it comes from somewhere, but it's incredibly powerful. You have gone to the place of, okay, now this is what I do. This is my profession. This is how I create. So that involves a number of things. It involves having other people who work with you. It involves having clients. And I'm fascinated on both sides of things, like in your exploration and talking to other people and finding people who want to work on these kinds of projects with you. What has that been like? Have you felt any pushback? Have you had other people just be like, yes, this is what I've been waiting for? In the creative community, how have you felt the reaction?
It's a real divide. I think the divide is shrinking as time goes on. But it's interesting in the AI community, especially on social media. Every creator that I know will talk about negative comments. It's just a thing. It's you're always going to get them. Anything you post with AI you can just be guaranteed will have at least one or two comments that will be very negative. And I think that kind of speaks to a general feeling about AI. In the artist community, a lot of the artists that I talk to, some that I've worked with, it's very either or. I think at this point, there are a lot of people that are gung-ho on AI that really love it. And I know artists that just refuse to touch it. I don't know as many artists that are lukewarm. I think that's the interesting part. I know a lot of artists that are curious, and those are the ones that I try to work with. I try to kind of foster, because it can't all just be the people that are 100% bought in. I think for large-scale adoption, it's going to have to be the people that are slightly interested but maybe have some reservations. Those are the people that I think with training, once they kind of see what AI can do, I think the buy-in is a lot easier. It's the people that are fundamentally opposed to it. I have no problems with those people. I completely respect their point of view, but that's a different conversation. Trying to work with somebody that has absolutely no wanting or desire to work with AI. Like I said, I respect it, but for what I do and using kind of hybrid workflows, there does have to be some kind of consideration for bringing in AI on some level, or at least being able to say that they're okay with their work being as part of something that has AI, because some people don't want to. So it's a really interesting moment, because I do feel like it's shifting. I think more people are turning around, turning their minds around to it, but it's not 100% there yet.
Yeah, you touch on something important there, like that divide. And my nature is to project forward. And part of that is accepting that right now, the people who are being asked to accept these tools, use these tools, or being able to have this process, some people are very far down the road in their careers where it's like, it's too late. I don't want to do that. I want to hang on. But then some of them are the best iterators where it's like, okay, something new, something fun to play with. And you've got, mid and early career people. You almost want to conduct an experiment with some younger creators now who are, coming up, where it's like, okay, you will not use any AI tools for the next 10 years. You over here are going to be native adopters. You're going to use them. And then this third group where it's like, okay, we're going to spend some time developing your skills in the absence of AI and then slowly incorporate them and just look at what the end results are. Are they different in the sense that I look at my son who's a freshman in college, but even like my daughter who's 10, who likes digital art, like, okay, you're going to grow up with these tools. Any system you go into, any practice you go into, like you're going to have to make an active choice to not use AI, because it's going to be so pervasive by the time you get to age 20. And, but then there's the people who have done all of the reps, done the hard work, I developed all of my skills, and then I added these tools and it expanded and augmented them. And I just wonder, like, are we going to lose some of that where it's like one screenwriter I talked to, he said, yeah, no, you got to get up every morning and do the reps. You need to sit there and write and not use the tools so that because so much of using the tools, and I'm sure you experience this, is already having an eye, already having an understanding of like what kind of shots you want and having some technical understanding as well as creative understanding. And then the tools help you get there, as opposed to I developed all of those skills with the help of AI. Anyway, it's just one of those fascinating things. Like you said, we're at an interesting moment where the explosion is happening all around us. All of these tools and all of these abilities that have been unlocked. It's like, okay, there's a difference between someone who is a master adding that and somebody who is completely new and their entire foundation is built upon it. So just something to think about moving forward. But one of the other things that you had touched on, or I had mentioned before, so you're doing work for people, just as there is resistance in the artistic community, so there is in the commercial world. Where do you find those clients? I imagine the voices are not universal at those companies that you work with, where sort of eagerness or comfort with AI. We certainly have heard plenty about all the pushback that Coke got when they made their 30-second AI commercial. So I'm just curious about your experience in that realm, given the work that you've been doing.
Well, there's a lot there actually I wanted to touch on, but I mean, I'll answer your immediate question first because it's a great, all great questions. Clients, I'm seeing a lot of clients that are really interested in AI. And I think from a client perspective, it makes a lot of sense. Now, a lot of times it's actually kind of filling in a knowledge gap because as we all know, we can go on and see AI creating videos that look completely photoreal. And if you're not in the space and you're not working with AI, it'd probably be very easy to say, well, okay, this can be made really quickly and easily. It shouldn't cost anything. Or I can, on the flip side, the client can think, well, anything that I want to have done, AI can do. So therefore, let's go fully into AI. So if anything, I'm seeing a lot of enthusiasm for AI, but a lot of the work that's done on our end has to be the realistic kind of the conversation about what AI can and can't do, because it really can't do everything. And a lot of, what we work with, what we're pitching is this sort of hybrid approach, which is offering control with AI. But the way that we do offer control is by bringing in a lot of traditional methods, things like compositing, which is incredibly powerful, things like, even traditional animation. We will bring that in because AI, as powerful as it is, it has its limitations. And I think especially when we're trying to fit a very specific brief, this is something that we talk about a lot. If you want to execute a very, very specific vision, you have to kind of ask yourself, why do you want it done with AI? We have, taking outside of AI, we have CG in the visual effects world. If you throw enough money at something and you have a team of VFX artists, you can create pretty much anything you want. That technology already exists. With AI, it's a little bit more of you're throwing a dart at a board and then drawing the bullseye around it. So it just depends on what you're trying to achieve. And I do tell people AI maybe isn't the best route for some of the things they want to do. It's a very popular buzzword right now. Everyone's really excited about it. But there's, I forget the name of it, but I had this pulled up actually for a speech I gave a while ago, and I can't remember it, but it's basically this concept of technology, which is there's usually a tremendous amount, when a new technology comes around, there's a tremendous amount of excitement. People start attaching the world to it. It's going to do this. It's going to do that. It's incredible. And then slowly, as the actual reality of the technology comes through, then a lot of those early adopters drop out because they lose interest. They move on to the next thing. But slowly over time, the people that are really corely committed to that technology, if they stay with it, then that technology slowly comes back. And then it just becomes widespread. And you see this with the internet. Obviously, everyone knows about the internet bubble and the height of craziness and the 90s of people saying, okay, this is going to do this, it's going to do that. It's incredible. And then obviously it crashed because for a variety of reasons, but in large part because the actual value offered at that time didn't live up to the expectations. A lot of people talk about AI as a bubble. And I don't believe that it's a bubble in the sense that it's going to go away. I do believe that there is a lot of excitement right now. A lot of people coming in thinking it's going to, completely change everything. It already has, don't get me wrong. But it's important, I think, to also understand the limitations. And so that's a lot of the talk with clients is educating. It is saying, this is what it can do. This is what it can't do. Does this fit with the brief that you have? And if it doesn't, then maybe it's better to think about traditional ways of accomplishing it, which is why we do focus on the hybrid model, because at this stage in AI's life, in terms of working with clients, it's just not really possible to do fully AI and still follow a brief. Now, if the sky's the limit, you can do whatever you want, the client gives you a blank check, says, all right, just create whatever, then yeah, of course AI can do that. But I haven't met those clients. I mean, who knows? Maybe those clients will come to me someday. But usually a client has a very specific thing they want to do, which is understandable.
It's interesting. I had written down, as you were talking before, to mention the internet bubble insofar as the similarities, but also the substantive differences between that bubble and this one, insofar as I was working and writing animation for Stan Lee and his Stan Lee Media animated company when the bubble burst. And the internet held so much potential and possibility. But part of that was infrastructure, where we were doing online animation when people had dial-up modems. That's problematic given the bandwidth that you had. And to some degree, those arguments can be made today with AI and everyone having to pour so much CapEx into developing their data centers so that they can process everything that we're asking it to do. But the reason why I had written it down, this feels like one of those moments or one of those transitions. And yes, the internet took 20 years before the true winners emerged. But with AI, whatever the time is, whether we're on an exponential curve or not, the idea that it's going to take some time to incorporate, and we have to, as you're saying, the hybrid model, something that integrates, but it's neither going to take over tomorrow, nor are we going backwards, because it's here to stay, because it can make and empower ability to make incredible things that they couldn't make before. You don't turn back the clock on something like that, right? But what I find interesting, because, and it's so fascinating, you say that you're educating clients, that's so much of what's happening right now, is that the information awareness, absorption, eagerness to take it in is all over the map. With any creative you might talk to, there's some people who are trying to learn everything and play with everything, and others who are just I don't want to do it, and others who are just let it shake out for a while, because every week that goes by, there's 20 tools that are coming out, and I can't possibly get my head around all of them. So which ones should I use? And I'm going to end up asking you that question in just a minute, for our listeners, some of the tools that you're using that you feel are incredibly useful in this little moment in time before another one comes out. But one of the things that really impressed me, and actually was a big reason why I reached out to you, was you are clearly experimenting and iterating and then sharing out to educate others and show them things I'm putting myself of a certain age here, but back in the day, Who Framed Roger Rabbit is, you've got live action in 2D, and that thing was technically, apparently, there were so many stories about how that production was really hard, really expensive. They almost pulled the plug multiple times. I love the movie, and I was amazed at the technology. And you posted not so long ago about this was hard, but now it's easy. And you had a really fascinating thing just recently about storyboarding, and then turning a storyboard and visualizing it. And long-winded way of sort of leading to a question of this spirit of experimentation, exploration, fun, play, whatever you want to call it. What motivates you and to do all of this and then share it out and try to explain to the creative community what you're doing?
What motivates me is actually just kind of going back to the analogy you had before of being in a sandbox. It's a real sense of play. And there is certainly a sense also of wanting to kind of share and wanting to, create new things. The Who Framed Roger Rabbit example. I'm really glad you brought that up because it's one of my favorite things that we've done recently. That was created from the sense of actual just experimentation on an earlier project where it was literally just like, can AI do this? I mean, let's try it. And then it did. It's like, oh my God, this is actually incredible. It's so powerful that I can, because you're absolutely, you're absolutely right. I'm one of the main animators on Who Framed Roger Rabbit. My memory is terrible. I forget his name, but I have his book, and it's like it's called The Animator's Survival. And it's an incredible book. It's a credible resource for beginning animators. But he talks a lot about the production of Who Framed Roger Rabbit in that. And it was, as you say, a nightmare. And you understand why, because getting 2D animation to match with live action and having actors interact with 2D characters, it's like, I mean, it was, at the time, it was, unseen. It was unheard of. But with the AI angle, it's actually relatively easy. I say relatively. Relative is very important there, but it is relatively easy. And the reason why I'm really proud of that test is that, to me, that opens up so many more doors of experimentation where, one of the things that we really try to push on our studio is not actually using AI to cut costs. It's not using AI to replace people. It's using AI to make content that really just can't exist otherwise. And that's where I see that going. Okay, if doing 2D animation into live action previously was so difficult that it was prohibitive, maybe that also prevented us as creators of thinking of even other ways to kind of blend mediums, to create new mediums. And AI, I think, gives us the opportunity to explore that, to test that. So a lot of the experimentation comes from that. It just comes from saying, okay, well, let's see what it can do. Let's push the envelope. Sometimes you got to run before you can walk. So that definitely came from experimentation. It came from just, seeing what was possible and trying to push the limits. For every test I post, there's like 10 that didn't make the cut, where I try things. And that's the thing I had to get used to very early on, spending days kind of working team and then coming up with examples at the end where it's like, yeah, that didn't work. And so there's a sense that, I had to kind of remind myself, like, everything is progress. Even if it doesn't lead to something that is shareable, it's still information. And it makes the times where, like in that example, something comes out that's actually really interesting. It makes it all the more sweet. Yeah, there is to me, the answer to your question, it's just about wanting to see how far we can push this technology, what we can do with it. Going back to something, I got a lot of comments on that post, and a lot of them were negative and understandable. A lot of people bring up it's something I've heard a lot, which is that AI can only look backwards. It can't look forward. And what people mean by that is that, it's trained on data, and so it can only create amalgamations of that data. It can't create new things. And I've heard that argument a lot, but I think of it differently. When I think of creating something, when I have an idea, before taking AI out of, if I have an idea for a story or something, what I'm actually doing is I'm just bridging different pieces of information together. I'm taking something, whether it's like quote from, a movie that I liked, or like, I was on vacation recently and I saw this, beautiful vista, and I said, oh, it'd be interesting to take that environment and maybe throw these characters in. It's the same process. I'm taking stimulation from the world and I'm just blending them together. To me, AI is the same thing. It's just doing that. So I really don't agree with the idea that AI can't create. To me, I think it can. And that's what's interesting to me about it. It's interesting to me to use it as a creation engine and as this place of, let's enhance creativity. Let's enhance our ability to form new things. I look at that piece and now I'm thinking, okay, well, how can I push that even further? How can I make new things? Which I think is how it should be.
You once again touching on so many fascinating things, but I'm going to focus in on, like, you're articulating that central artist's debate of, are we creating something new, or are we assembling what has been before, reassembling it in new ways through the prism of the self? So that's what makes it unique. We're pulling together our own experiences and our own exposure to ideas and images and thought, and then channeling it into something new. And this idea that AI can't do that is to me, and it sounds like you as well, is to ignore, like, AI is doing the exact same thing on a much broader sort of knowledge base, but pulling it together based on prompting, cueing, guiding. But this idea that, it was something you touched on a minute ago, this idea like, can it do this? I'm gonna try it, see what happens. And it's not like it was in a manual somewhere where it's like, okay, this AI can do this and not this. You have to explore, and then it generates. And it's something that didn't exist before. If that's not creation, I don't know what is, in the sense that, when you talk about, Aristotle's 7 stories, we've been telling the same stories over and over again. We just dress them up differently. Okay, it's dressed up based on the time that you're in and your experiences and your thought about yourself and humanity and giving them new dialogue, but the stories are essentially the same. Is that not what ultimately AI is doing? And so I find it to be sort of this semantic argument insofar as what exists now did not exist before. That is creation. Yes, it's not going to prompt itself, although the day may come. I talked to an artist not that long ago who had created an experiment where he had AI look at a photo, I believe, of a bird and say, okay, if you were to write the description that would be at the museum next to that photo, what would you write? It writes it out. And then he had another AI look at the description and then create the bird. And then another AI look at the bird and description, and played this game of telephone and ended up in this really weird and abstract, curious place. But it was new. It was something that did not exist before. And it was this abstraction of a bird. And so there is creation going on, yes, with humans at the heart of it and guiding. But I resist the all too easy statement that it's not capable of. It is part of this creative process. But sorry, I didn't mean to go on a long diatribe there.
I love everything you said. I think that's exactly it, isn't it? I mean, that's exactly it. And I love the Aristotle quote. I think that's a fantastic way to put it, because it is that. It is that. I mean, we all as humans grown up with the same stories. It's the same thing. And that's not to discount or just devalue it at all. We still obviously are storytelling driven creatures. We still, even despite there only being the same 7 basic stories, we still somehow yearn and hunger for new content. It's like it's part of our DNA. So yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Beautifully said. Yeah, I agree 100%. To pull this into the pragmatic for a little bit longer before we pull back for a final philosophical take. In looking over your work and some of your posts and whatnot, part of what it seems like you're pointing people to is that here are the tools. Here's Kling, here's Comfy UI, here's Flux, Runway, VO2, Minimax. I'm curious, like, as you're developing your workflow for the people who listen to this podcast and are experimenting themselves, where would you point them to? Like, this is a great place to go and experiment, or if you're a little further down the line, this is something, if you really want to see something that's going to blow your mind and maybe convince you to incorporate this into your workflow, where would you point them?
Excellent question. So I think if you have not used any tool before and you're just starting out, I would just to start with creating imagery, I would start with Midjourney, because I think Midjourney has a very good, easy to use interface. Coherence is okay. And by coherence, I mean, typing in a text and having it roughly fit that text and solve that text. I think it's a good starting point. You'll create images very quickly that I'm going to put on a limb and say probably most people would be impressed by. I think Midjourney is a great starting point if you're creating imagery. If you're wanting to bring that imagery to life and you've never touched any of the tools before, Runway is the best, easiest starting off point. So I would recommend those two, Midjourney and Runway, just to add in some basic movement to anything really, to animation, to live action, to any piece. If you are a bit more advanced and you're wanting to kind of push it, I would recommend starting with Krea, KRE, which has a really good image generation and video generation platform. It's all baked into one thing. Again, you can create really good imagery. The prompt coherence on Krea is better because they use Flux, as far as I'm aware, which is a better text image generation model. And it's very easy to use. And you can also control what video models you use. The thing that I tell people is that because these video models are trained on different data sets, there's no one size fits all. It just kind of depends on what you want to do. So if you're getting more advanced, I would say if you're wanting to create animation, whether that be 2D or 3D animation, my current favorites are Kling, specifically the 1.6 model, which is great. Halo's Minimax is fantastic for animation. And if you have access to it, which is a big if, because not everyone does, and they're pretty crazy with access right now, is Veo 2, specifically by Google. Those are all really great for animation. The live action, I mean, I still think Veo probably tops the list for most of these. But if you don't have access to that, I would say Runway is very good for live action. If you're very advanced, if you want to get even more advanced, then looking into the open source tools through Comfy UI, that's the platform that I use for open source. Again, there are easier ways to access this. We use basically a run pod where we can set up our own servers specifically for Comfy UI, because the main thing with all of these tools is that they are GPU destroyers. And so rather than buying a data farm, we use cloud. So I would say that if you're advanced and you want to get into that, there's some really interesting open source video models coming out. One is one of the most recent ones, UAN. I'm seeing a lot of excellent image to video creation coming from that, which can rival Runway easily, can rival even Kling on certain things. And the benefit of the open source models is that you can train them on your own data. So that's really useful for us, for serving clients. We can take data that's given to us, and because it's open source, because it's private, we're not handing that data over, to another company where they can do whatever they want with it. It's all stored and used on our own. So that's the more advanced version of it. And then if you have an Adobe subscription, the Photoshop tools are pretty good. And I'm talking in the image editing now, but the image editing in Photoshop is very good. After Effects has a couple of kind of AI things that are interesting. But I would say really, the top of the list for anybody, even the advanced people, is going to be Veo. Veo is just incredible. And then probably followed by Kling. I think Kling is fantastic.
I know what I have seen of the product of Veo. I have not had an opportunity to use it myself. It's mind-blowing. So let's take that last step back as we head here to the end, where, I always hesitate to ask this, but look into your crystal ball. Where are we in, say, 3 years? Or if we want to frame it in sort of a kitschy kind of question, when does an AI film, when is there going to be best AI feature going to be a category at the Oscars? When does this become sort of adopted, and how powerful are things a year down the road, 3 years down the road? It's hard to say given how fast everything is changing, but where do you think we're headed?
I don't think there will ever be, and I'm willing to eat crow on this, but I don't think there will ever be an AI film category. I think it will be just adopted into filmmaking. And I personally believe that there will always be a need for some kind of human touch to it. And so I think I could easily see a complete AI film in a best animation. I think a best live action film, that could be wrong, will probably, it's already being used. I mean, The Brutalist used AI, so I think that's already here. But in terms of how forefront it is, I think a year or two from now, we'll start to see that even more so. But then I think in terms of where we are 3 years from now, I think it's a very good question. There is a tremendous amount of content out there. There's more content out online and on TV now than people can possibly watch in their lifetimes. And most people aren't really consuming content in the way that they used to. I mean, people are kind of used to short content now. The attention spans are different. The amount of people that are going and sitting in a movie theater and sitting down for 2-3 hours watching something, front to back, uninterrupted, is getting more and more rare. Where AI fits into that is suddenly you now have even more supply. Supply was already up, but you have exponential more supply than demand, which I think is going to cause more of an imbalance. I think things are going to get harder for the film industry before they get better. I do think it will eventually correct itself and figure itself out. But I think right now we're in a very unique spot that I think is going to just get worse. And we're seeing a lot of these, on the VFX side, there's been a lot of VFX companies and animation companies that have closed. Jellyfish Pictures just closed yesterday, The Mill, Technicolor. These are major studios that have shut down. Now, whether or not AI was the source of it is for somebody else to discuss. But I do believe that AI will cause a lot more to close down in the future unless they can rapidly pivot or brace it. I think a big reason is because people aren't engaging with content in the same way. So where I think that will lead us to eventually is more of an interactive style of content, where I think we as consumers are already kind of used to interaction with video games, kind of just lean in kind of technology. I think the ability to kind of really personalize content, which is only possible with the speed that AI can offer, is going to be more interesting. And I think, we already see some of that with YouTube. YouTube is extremely popular, and partly why is because it's more personalized content. It's the algorithm understands who you are as Andy and will recommend videos to you. So obviously you're going to spend more time on it because you're watching videos that are slightly more geared towards what you're interested in, versus seeing just a huge amount of videos and trying to kind of handpick something that maybe you'll like. I think we're heading in that direction. And in that sense, there is always a demand for content, because what you like will always change and you'll always be interested in new things and you'll always need new content for that. So I think we are headed in that direction. What exactly that looks like, I don't know for sure. And maybe 3 years is too ambitious for that. I'm talking a fundamental shift, but in many ways it's already happening. So I think that's where we're headed on a general level.
Yeah, it's interesting. I agree with you that the amount of content, there's going to be so much noise. It's going to be hard to get the signal to come out of it. But that eventually, like you said, that sort of personalization piece, the signal will find us. The signal will emerge. The quality will emerge. Just right now, there perhaps is a bit too much noise to hear it clearly. Thank you so much for coming on today. This was fascinating and incredibly useful. So for anyone who's listening who wants to see your work, wants to know more about you, see what kind of projects you're working on, learn from what you're sharing, where should they go find you?
Yeah, the best way to find me and have a conversation with me is LinkedIn. I'm on it too often. And then to see more of my work is going to be my studio, which is Animated Company. And that's animatedcompany.com. But again, on LinkedIn, you can find that as well.
All right. Again, thank you so much for coming on. And I'll be watching your work. I'll be reading your posts, learning a lot. And as I've told many guests now, I'll check in with you somewhere down the line to see if what we talked about ends up being ridiculously wrong or if we were on top of where things were headed. So thanks for coming on.
Certainly it will be wrong in some ways, because who knows? But yes, absolutely. I look forward to having that conversation when that happens.
Great. All right. Be well.
Thank you, Andy.
Thanks for listening to the Creative AI Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or visit creativeaipod.com.